All right, welcome back to Rush Hockey. We have a special guest on with us. It is Calgary Wranglers broadcaster Sandra Prusina, taking part in our Women in Sports and Business panel here tonight. Sandra, great to have you. We appreciate you coming on from north of the border. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Corey. I hope you're well, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely, yes. So by this point, you'll have been on the panel already. That will have already gone down. But what is it like just to start being able to share your story and what you bring as one of only a few women who broadcast hockey in North America?
Certainly means a lot. It's not something that I take lightly. It's something that I certainly take a lot of pride in. And I hope that people can look at me, not only people who want to go into broadcasting, but just in sports in general, because there's been a lot of pushback. Even to this day, there's still a lot of pushback about women getting involved in men's sports. And it can be things like communication or front office jobs, reporters, all those kinds of things. So to be able to be the voice of something, it means a lot to me. And I'm a born and raised Calgarian. I grew up in this city. I grew up going to the Saddle Dome. So I want people to be able to see that you can stay at home and try and reach for the stars and find your dreams because it is possible. You put in the work and anything is possible.
So what is your background? You mentioned, of course, Calgary. What is your background going from being in radio to now play-by-play for the Calgary Wranglers?
Yeah, it's not a super interesting journey, to be completely honest with you. I'm an only child. I grew up loving sports. It's something that just gave me a sense of belonging. And as I grew older, it only became a bigger part of my life, whether it was playing sports or being involved with writing or talking about it. And it just seemed like a natural career jump for me. It was either that or teaching. So I went to the University of Calgary and I finished a BA in English. Honestly, I was going to be a teacher because at that time, I won't give any dates so I don't completely age myself, but at that time, there weren't a lot of women in sport. And in journalism in general, it can be a very difficult industry to break into, especially in your hometown. So I decided I'm going to go into teaching. It's not a career for me. I can just say it. I don't have the personality to be a teacher. I don't have a crazy backbone, so it would be difficult for me to tell people, especially kids, no. And at that time, I remember that summer, and I had to do a lot of soul searching and basically figure out, okay, what do I really want to do with my life? You're in your early to mid 20s and you've got to figure things out quickly. And there was a post-degree journalism program at another university here in Calgary. I ended up taking it. It's a 1 year, just really intense 1 year program. And right out of it, I got a job in radio here at one of the local talk radio stations, and it was for an overnight anchor. So I worked some brutal hours, basically 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And looking back, Corey, there were some days, I probably shouldn't say this out loud. There were some days I didn't know how I got home because I was so exhausted working a graveyard shift. And eventually I kept plugging away at it. I'm not going to say it was easy. There were times where I was just like, maybe I should give up. But I tried to look at the bigger picture, and eventually other doors opened for me. So I got to do evening sports anchoring, which turned into afternoon sports anchoring Monday to Friday. And then because of that and having that set schedule, it allowed me to pursue other avenues in broadcasting. So I was able to go to 3 Olympics. I did Vancouver, London, and Sochi. I covered women's soccer, women's hockey, and a few other sports in between. And then in the summer of, I think it would be 2016 or 2017, the Canadian Women's Hockey League, we had a team here called the Calgary Inferno. They were looking for a play-by-play voice, and it was not paid at that time, but they certainly asked me if that was something I was interested in doing. And that's how my foot got into the door in terms of play-by-play. So I was really on the ground level of figuring out how to do things, because when I started in broadcasting, play by play wasn't even on my radar. I loved hockey, but it was not on my radar because I was a woman. and I am a woman. I still am a woman. I shouldn't say was, but the opportunities were not there. So why would I even think about it? And then I got my feet wet with the Calgary Inferno. Unfortunately, 2019 the league folded, which was really tough because the team that year had won the championship. It was an absolute wagon. I look back on that roster, and the Canadian and American national team players that were on that team were just incredible, but the league couldn't sustain itself. And obviously now with the professional women's soccer or hockey league, sorry, you can look back and say, okay, it was all worth it. But for me, I was at a junction where, okay, I don't have a play-by-play job anymore, so that's it. That my run was over, and then the pandemic came, and the Professional Women's Hockey Association was doing these little, they were called Dream Gap tours, and Calgary was the very first one, and it was right in the heart of the pandemic. No fans, no nothing. And they said, would you like to do the play-by-play for these broadcasts? Nobody can watch in person, so we're going to stream all of the games. And then that got my juices flowing again. The pandemic, for all the cruddy stuff it brought us, it also brought me the opportunity to broadcast Stockton Heat games, because for people that don't know, they actually came north of the border during the pandemic, had their own little bubble, and I was asked to come on that broadcast by a good friend who was doing the play-by-play, and he basically said, "Kid, this could be you someday." So that opened the door for men's hockey, and the Calgary Wranglers came to Calgary, and I know they say the rest is history, but to say that I was looking for it, no, it found me, basically. So
So a lot of women say there was, an inspiration. They saw someone as a sideline reporter or a play-by-play, for example, and they said, "Oh, I can do this." But for you, that wasn't really the case. It was just I made the own opportunity, and now I'm kind of passing it forward, right?
that's really the truth. Looking back on my childhood, when I watched the local news, there weren't a lot of women doing sports. There was one doing it for Channel 3 here in Calgary. It was called CFCN, and I would see her from time to time. So I did see one woman, and her name was Tammy Christopher. I don't know what she's doing these days, but if she ever comes across this, thank you, because she was the first woman I ever saw. But after that, nobody, Corey. Honestly, nobody. So it was one of those things where working at the Olympics, I think, broadened my horizon a little bit more, because most of my colleagues there happened to be women, and they came from different markets, Canadian markets. So Ottawa, Toronto, Edmonton, I was able to see what they were able to do. And that opened my eyes in a sense that I knew that I wasn't alone in the industry, but maybe I was on a little bit of an island here in Calgary.
So what about the job has been the most, rewarding for you? Being a woman or not, just being in American Hockey League play-by-play for a team that's had some success over the last few years.
Yeah, storytelling, I think, is one of the biggest reasons we get into this industry, and being the voice that communicates what's happening on the ice to the person either watching or listening. So being in the middle of that sandwich is really cool, and being the person to have somebody else feed off of your energy. I love that. And the fact that I can do it in my city is probably the greatest gift, because I can tell you, as a little girl in the Saddle Dome, I never imagined I would be up there sitting in the Peter Marr radio broadcast booth doing what I do. And on top of that, and I'm sure you can see this too, is there's something to be said when you see a player and your team is part of their journey. So let's use Dustin Wolf as an example. Flames drafted him, knew he was a really good junior player, and it's one of those, okay, we'll keep an eye on him and see how he does. He makes the jump to pro, and he had a really good opening season with Stockton. Okay, let's see how he does in his sophomore season to see if he has one of those, like we call it, the sophomore slump.
Mm-hmm.
No, this kid is pretty good. Okay, he can handle American Hockey League players, but can he handle the National Hockey League? Well, evidently he can handle the National Hockey League. He's pretty damn good. I think he's the Calder front runner. My bias aside, I think he's fantastic. And to be able to have the front row seat to that journey is incredible. And there have been a lot of great stories over the last going on 3 years here in Calgary. Matt Coronado, somebody else, Rory Cairns, we can talk about him, had a great junior career with Sioux, was struggling a little bit as he became a professional, was jumping from ECHL to AHL. Now he's one of the key players on the AHL, and he had a little taste of the NHL where he put up 4 points in 6 games and certainly did not look out of place. So for me, it's about being part of a player's journey. And when maybe they look back on their first professional goal or a big game that they had and your voice happens to be just a little part of that, it's so fulfilling.
Yeah. So Rory Cairns is that guy for us as the first example of someone going through the Calgary system. He began here, played 40 games here, went between the ECHL and Calgary, and now, of course, had his 2 assists in his first NHL game a couple of months ago, and he's having a fine career for himself so far. What's it been like covering him and being up close and personal with him before he gets his shot at the NHL? And what's the reaction like when he does make it and have the success he does?
It's very well earned when you look at Rory. And it's interesting talking to the coaching staff because they say all of the players want to play with Rory. So that speaks not only to him as a player, but also as an individual. That means he comes to the rink prepared every single time. And if we look back on the last month and a half, yes, there have been difficult moments, but I think for Rory, knowing that, okay, eyes are fixated on him now because last season he was in the bottom 6, right? He wasn't a key cog of the team and he didn't always need to be leaned upon. But a door was open this year with all of the call-ups with the Calgary Flames and some waivers and some players being traded. Obviously, you lose Walker Dewar, Jacob Pelche. I think the team thought maybe Cole Schwint would end up in the American Hockey League. He gets picked up on waivers by Vegas. So the door opened for Rory. And not only did he go through the door, he absolutely busted it down with his knee, right? He's a top line center. Everyone wants to play with him. He's having a career year. If you hit 25 goals professionally, you know that you're having a really good season. And he continues to grow. And I know a lot of, if we look at this week, really tough week for the Flames. Obviously, you lose Michael Backlund. Connor Zary is on a 2-game suspension right now, and a lot of people wondering why Rory wasn't called up. And I like that because that means people are paying attention to him and knowing that he is an important piece of the Calgary Flames future. He's developing well, and come fall, who knows? Maybe he gets a spot out of training camp.
I hear this about, players who have made the NHL from the rush. Aiden Hill is one of them, for example, who played just 5 games here, 2017 or so season. And of course, he won a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights. But are players like Rory, you look at them, you observe them, and you just know they are National Hockey League players at some point down the road?
It's interesting. I hover on the line of that. I think you have to have the right people around you to show you that you can be an NHL player, that you're not just a professional, because that alone is a wonderful feat, but the fact that you can be an NHLer. And I think for Rory, it's about understanding that this is not just his only level. He's got another level he can reach. And part of me wonders, a little bit of his backstory this year is he actually didn't even get a preseason game with the Flames. He was one of the first batch of players sent back down to the American Hockey League. And I have to wonder in the back of my mind what kind of motivation that was for him to really take that next step. So I think now he knows that he's an NHLer, but I also think not getting into an exhibition game might have been a bit of a wake-up call for him. And whether that was the way he approaches his training, his fitness, all of the off-ice stuff, to become the complete player now that's just on the doorstep of becoming, I would say, a full-time NHLer.
So what you're saying is Brad Pascal knows exactly what he's doing by not playing him.
If there's one guy I'm going to trust, and his name's not Craig Conroy, I think Brad Pascal is probably next in line, yes.
Sure. Brad's wife is a very prominent woman in sports as well, just on the TV side
Yeah.
and her hockey career as well. What's it like now seeing the growing landscape of women who call play-by-play or do sidelines or anything for NHL teams and just beyond in the world of hockey broadcasting?
Yeah, Cassie is a great example of a good person, a good woman who wants to lift other women up. And if I can tell a story about her, and I hope she doesn't
Yeah.
mind, during the pandemic, I had been called to do some Canadian Women's Hockey League, or sorry, no, Canadian Women's National Team broadcasts here at Winsport. Again, it was during the pandemic, no fans, so they were streaming everything. And basically, they were having these camps to get everything going. We had been, in that period of isolation, but things started to open up a little bit. So they called me to do these broadcasts over at Winsport, which is the home of Hockey Canada. And Cassie, at that time, I don't remember her exact role with Hockey Canada, but she was almost like a scout. She was overseeing everything and all of the players, the U23s and the full senior team players, and then the U18s. And she happened to be listening to one of the broadcasts that I was doing. And she went on social media, and we had never met at this point, I will say. And I don't know if she really knew who I was, but she sent out, I think it was on Twitter, and she's like, wow, Sandra Prusina is actually really, really good at broadcasting, doing play-by-play. People should listen to her a little bit more. And that was unprompted. She didn't have to go and do that, but she just serendipitously happened to be listening to the broadcast that I was doing and sent that out. And the more that I'm in this industry, Corey, the more that I realize the importance of that, because we're all in such competition with each other. Yes, we are colleagues on some level, but we're all going for the same jobs. And as a woman, the competition is even more fierce because we need to hit certain plateaus that maybe a man doesn't, right? Because I've never stepped onto the ice as a man. I don't know what it's like to take a hard body check or to be involved in a fight like Alex Gallant is. I don't know. But the faith that she put in me to just put that out to the public, that probably is one of the things that also changed my career. So knowing that I could maybe be that voice for somebody and help another woman out along the way, and just lift another woman up. Yeah, so for everything that she's done, she's got like the Order of Canada, she's got Olympic medals. She's a really good human being above all of that. She's a great wife, a great mom, and a great human being. And we're lucky to have her here and that she's involved.
And you have a lot of women on that point, reaching out to you and knowing about your story and what you do just to learn from you and a pay it forward kind of thing?
Surprisingly, no. It's still a lot of men.
Really?
And yeah, and it's interesting. And they'll come job shadow with us a little bit and see what we're doing, but haven't had a lot of women come my way, at least. And I would like to say, I'm not sure who might watch this, but please, like, throw me on a message on LinkedIn, or if anybody does need any advice, I'm always there. And if I can just answer a couple of questions or make things seem a little bit clearer than mud, then I'm always here.
So what do you tell a woman who aspires to do what you do or something along those lines? I'm sure it gets a bit jaded at this point, all the questions about how do you break in, how do you do X, Y, and Z. But
Yeah.
What do you tell someone like that who reaches out to you and is in a familiar spot as you were 10, 15 years ago?
The best piece of advice I would say is be yourself, because you might watch me and or listen to me and like some of my tendencies and use that as an example, but be yourself. So the way that I call a game is not the way that Peter Marr called a game. It's not a way that Chris Cuthbert calls a game. It's not a way that Leah Hextall called the game, right? This is Sandra Prusina broadcasting. So create your own brand, basically, like the way that you broadcast and your intonations and your goal calls and the way you maybe converse with the color commentator or the rest of the panel. Just be yourself, be genuine, be honest. And I think people do appreciate that in the long run. People that enjoy listening to hockey and just they want to feed off of your energy. So be as genuine as you can. And if you're having a great time on that night, like make it be known. Don't be shy of being exuberant or excited. Of course, like be professional. At the end of the day, be professional, but be you. And I think that's the most important thing. One of the best little pieces nuggets I got was, if not you, then who? So if you're not willing to take that chance, someone else is going to take that chance. So you take the chance for yourself and just be yourself.
All right, last thing. Who is the most famous woman in your phone?
Cassie Campbell.
There you go. Great answer.
There, yeah, since we were talking about her, yeah, Cassie Campbell, a long time ago. Now that I look at my phone, I used to cover a lot of women's soccer, and at that time it was Christine Sinclair, but a lot has happened since that time, so I don't think her phone is the number is still active, or I don't think that connection's there. But she would be the next one.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the panel, of course. I know you don't do terribly too many of these, but what is it like to be able to share your story in front of women in sports and business here in Rapid City and beyond, and also an audience of men, women, and children, just hockey fans in general?
It means a lot. It truly is an honor, and I'm not blowing smoke when I say that. The older I get, the more I appreciate doing things like this. Maybe it wouldn't have meant as much 10 years ago, but Corey, I'm learning that, like, every opportunity is a blessing and a privilege. And without getting too philosophical, it does mean a lot. So just I'm so grateful for the support, and thank you for having me on. Stuff like this really solidifies the fact that I'm in the right industry, and it pushes me to keep going, like on my worst day. And you know how it is as a broadcaster, you mess up a name, your goal call isn't great, you get your tongue tied. Even on my worst day, these moments make it all worth it.